Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Blooming Daily. My name is Ruth Olujobi and I am so excited to have you join us again. I am very excited because we're continuing the second part of the episode we had last, which means I am back with our amazing guest, Kate Nicholson.
Hey everybody, it's good to be back.
Thank you so much for joining us again on the podcast, Kate. The last episode was amazing and many people truly enjoyed it, and I know that today's episode will be just as great. We had so many wonderful insights during the last episode, and it made me so happy because apart from just telling people, oh, do this, and this is what society says and this is what we oftentimes do to our body, I learned a lot about what I do to my body sometimes, or what I say to my body that might be working against me, right? So that was really amazing. Thank you so much for that amazing episode. So today we're going to be continuing on the episode, Why Can't I Get Quality Sleep? And on the last episode, we spoke about, some external factors and some even internal factors. And now today we're going to speak about an important part of this whole sleep issue, which is sleep deprivation, right? We're going to talk about what that is, the symptoms, the long-term effects, and then we're going to speak on tips to help you get better sleeping habits. So without much ado, we're going to start now with sleep deprivation. And I'm going to throw this to you, Kate. When you hear a student say, oh, I think I'm sleep deprived, or I think I'm having an issue with sleep deprivation, what comes to your mind?
Oh, I love this. Well, almost always, I think when a student comes to me and they're expressing a concern, which is based on an observation around what they're experiencing, I, by and large, acknowledge them because I think that we and you tend to know so much more about your bodies than we think that we do. We tend to Google everything or assume someone else knows more than us about our own bodies and our own experiences. So when someone comes and even their own languaging is like, I think I have this problem, basically I'm like, well, it's very possible that that's very true, So I think that people often are just looking for validation from someone that might be a little bit more informed or experienced. So first, I think whenever a student or a person just has this inkling around something being amiss or something not being quite right, heed that, get interested in that, lean into that, get curious, and that's where we start our conversation. So I think a lot of times people know more than they think they do around their own bodies. So if you don't think that you're getting enough sleep, I bet you're right.
Wow.
And I'm really glad that we're starting with sleep deprivation this episode, because let's just start where people really actually already are, right? Let's not start in theoretic land. Let's start where at least 70%, some recent research has shown, of college students acknowledge that they don't get enough sleep, or that they're getting less than 7 hours of sleep a night. And the average college student, I know some of you listening are not just college students, you might be in other chapters of your life, so this could very well apply to you too. But starting with college in the years of 18 to 24, early adulthood, late adolescence, typically the average person needs between 7 to 9 hours of sleep. And that's very individual, right? So some people will need more, some people will be okay with less. So we always want to acknowledge something called bio-individuality.
True.
Yeah. So that's where we start that conversation. It's I think I'm sleep deprived, says a student that walks into my office. And I was like, well, based on you perceiving your own experience and what feels good or not good for you, you're probably right? That's on a bio-individualistic observation. Versus referring to a piece of information on Google that says I should be or I shouldn't be doing something. Usually if someone feels like they're not doing well or doesn't feel right to them, it's based on their own experience, chances are that's true for them. So I think that sleep issues and sleep deprivation are kind of like the common groundwork that most people, and I would say at times in my life for sure, I qualify as someone that's sleep deprived. That's where we almost all are right now. So let's talk about that.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Kate, for mentioning how this can be so individualized, because it's easy for us to pick things from the net and just do what Google says and say like, how can I know like when I'm sleep deprived, and just pick the first 5 symptoms that come up on the net, right? Understanding that our bodies work in different ways and our bodies need different kinds of attention would go a long way. So yes, just like Kate said, if you feel that you're sleep deprived, the chances that you are very high, because you can tell yourself that you are sleep deprived, right? And so you might be wondering, oh, like, you know, what even is the meaning of sleep deprivation? This is when you're getting less amount of sleep than your body needs. And just like Kate said, we're not saying this is when you're getting less than 8 hours or when you're getting less than 7 hours. We're saying when you're getting less than the ideal amount your body needs, because your body needs what it needs, not what Kate needs or what I need, right? When you're getting less than the ideal amount your body needs to function, that's when you're sleep deprived. Now we're going to go into the symptoms of sleep deprivation. Like, how do I even know? What are the things I can like use to monitor my body, right? When I sit myself down, how can I say, I'm feeling this way, I'm feeling that way? Okay, what is my body telling me? And might this mean sleep deprivation? So, Kate, what do you think some symptoms of sleep deprivation are?
Well, I'll share from my own experience first about what it feels like for me when I am sleep deprived. And that definitely happens, because even though I know intellectually a lot of great information around sleep, life still happens. I still get interrupted, disrupted, dysregulated at times, and that could be due to a variety of factors. For example, I have 2 kids. Sometimes they wake up and they need me. Sometimes when I was in grad school, I mentioned last episode, I had to stay up a little later than I knew was best for my body. Short term, I needed to do it, and then I made sure to recuperate and recover later. So my roommate happens to be my husband, but a lot of you live with other people who have different bodies and different needs and different rhythms and different routines. So my partner gets up really early in the morning. So if I went to bed late, that's going to be a challenge for me to get disrupted too early in the morning. So all of us have a lot of different variables to consider, or that might interrupt even the best attempts at quality sleep. So when I, for whatever reason, am not getting quality of sleep, the first thing I notice is I'm pretty irritable. And I'm kind of a nice person. But the people who are closest to me or up in my household will know you did not sleep well.
Yes.
Yes, I can see the bags under your eyes. You don't look very enthusiastic about your day. You're kind of dragging your feet. I also get really klutzy, so I'll be dropping things. I can just tell like my attention is just not fully on. So attention span and concentration are actually very legitimized symptoms of sleep deprivation. So that'll just look like me being a klutz around my house or forgetting something. I get to work and I was like, oh, shoot, I left that thing on the counter. I'm just not very sharp. So the other thing would be, piggybacking off of that, for me it would be work. For some people it's their academic load, is our memory retention, our learning abilities, our academic performance all suffer when we are not getting enough sleep. And that could be just based on like one night of crappy sleep, and like you pulled an all-nighter or you drank alcohol or used substance, which definitely can interfere with most people's quality of sleep. You might pass out or like sleep really long time, like hours or quantity, but the quality of your sleep is typically very compromised by substance use. And I'm not judging it. I'm not saying do it or don't do it, but just understand that there's typically a consequence, and sleep is usually up there with that. So, or staying up too late with screens and like the blue light and all the ways it interferes with the brain chemistry that we rely on to ignite or set off what we call a sleep drive. So we want to recognize when I have a sleep drive, our body is signaling to us a big yawn, our eyelids feel heavy, and we're feeling tired. And then we also have something called a wake drive, a natural moment in the morning when we start to want to wake up, or our body is stirred. So when we're out of sync with our sleep drive and our wake drive, for again a number of reasons, we will feel really disoriented the next day. It's and it's common anyway. It's common. Everybody will experience this differently. But like disorientation, like, wait, what day is it? Like, what do I need to do today? Again, not very sharp. So just moving through your day feels effortful, right? It's like very energy expensive. We're not feeling very efficient the next day. Or, throughout the week or onwards, depending on how much our sleep deprivation is accumulating. So one night can really throw us off, and it's certainly a lifestyle or habituated way of having sleep deprivation. These will become more of our normative experience, which just diminishes the quality of life that we're able to give to academics or to relationships. So a few other examples of sleep deprivation. For me, irritability, which will spill into just mood regulation, right? Feeling kind of moody, right? Or sensitive. And I don't say sensitive in a bad way. I think it can be a lovely characteristic or experience to be sensitive to things. But when we have a lower tolerance of sensitivity to things like pain, and that can be physical pain or emotional pain. So we tend to be more reactive or activated by things that feel stressful.
True.
So the same examples of stressors could happen day to day, but our perception and how we feel affected or impacted by them can be much more heightened and harsh when we are in sleep deprivation mode. So I think that's really interesting. It's not that life is necessarily designed harder the next day. It's that my perception and my capacity for the day and those stressors is very different when I have quality sleep or when I don't have quality sleep. There's a few more, but I want to bounce this back to you, my friend. I'm curious before I kind of list off some things that might or might not be some common knowledge. What is your experience? Now, you know what I look and feel like when I'm sleep deprived. What do you look or feel like when you're sleep deprived?
Yeah, that is a great question, right? And I feel like there are lots of common signs, because for me too, I also feel like I have reduced attention span for so many things, and it's really bad because I have to go to classes, I have to do things, but then imagine I'm trying to do like calculus and I'm like and I'm sleep deprived. Like I can barely focus on what I'm like doing, right? And so that's one thing for me. I feel like my attention span is reduced and I can barely like function properly. Another thing is I feel like it's interesting because I feel ill when I am sleep deprived. I didn't acknowledge this for many months until I was noticing that this is because of sleep, right? I would feel like my head was getting hot and my body was weak, and then I'll realize it's because I got very little sleep at night, right? And so one thing that happens to me, and I don't know how many other people this happens to, is that I will feel like I'm ill. I'll feel like really ill. And then when I get enough sleep the night, like after, I'll feel so much more healthier, right? And so that's one thing that happens to me. And then another one is like fatigue. Fatigue is, I'm sure this happens to a lot of people, right? I will feel like I just want to end whatever I'm doing quickly. Like I just want to get over with this essay like as soon as I can. Or I want to get over with this meeting as soon as I can so that I can go back to my room, right? Fatigue is one way I know that, okay, I'm feeling very sleep deprived, right? So yeah, those are some of the ways for me.
I'm so glad you brought up the fatigue piece, because it feels a little obvious, right? When we don't get enough sleep, we feel tired. And when we feel really sleep deprived, fatigue, which is like a little bit of a heavier bodily felt sense of tired, right? Tired, you might just feel a little like you could close your eyes and take a nap, but fatigue feels like it's in your bones, right?
Yes.
And you're trying to walk around, it just feels like harder. So what's interesting, when you walk around campus or walk around your community and you say, hey, how are you doing? I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong from your experience, but I feel like people say one of two things. They say I'm fine, right? They're just going to give a surface answer because it feels like a formality or like an etiquette thing that someone doesn't really want to know necessarily how you're doing. So you say, fine, I'm fine. How are you? Or if someone does ask you, like, hey, how are you? Like, how did that exam go? You finished? Yay. How are you doing? And I think such a common response is like, oh, I'm so tired. I'm tired. I'm so tired. I'm so tired. I'm so tired. It's like such a culturally, whether it's a campus culture or, a wider spread culture, depending on where you're listening from, almost like a badge of honor or an assumption of a normative experience. Like, yeah, we're all tired all the time. And it's funny that either we kind of glorify it as in I must have worked harder than the average person or done more than the average person to earn my badge of fatigue and tired.
This is so true. This is actually so true. Just like you said, I remember someone telling me that, oh, he doesn't get why people say they're tired. Like, it's a thing to be proud of. Like, oh, I'm so exhausted. Like, it's like a badge they should wear. And he's like, he doesn't understand that. And now that you say it, it makes so much sense. Like, why do we take pride in being tired? Like, I'm more tired than you are, which means I worked more than you worked, which means I'm getting more things done than you are. Like, why? Like, why are we taking pride in being more tired than the next person beside us? So, yeah.
Like, who goes around bragging? Although, please, the wellness practitioner in me wishes we could make this cool. Who goes around bragging about how much sleep they got last night?
True.
And like, I got so much sleep. I slept so hard. That was the best sleep ever. I love going to sleep. It doesn't really have a sexy slant necessarily, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I pulled an all-nighter is kind of badass, right? Or
Yes.
just norm. Like, it's just normal. And that's the other thing. It's like when we all say that we're tired, if we're not fine, then we're tired, right? And we don't tend to question that. Like, it doesn't sound like there's anything wrong. It's like, oh, you're either fine or you're tired. Okay,
True.
What else is new? What else is true for you? Like, okay, moving on. But like, shouldn't we be pausing and saying, wow, why am I always so tired? Why do I always hear the word tired? Mm-hmm. Maybe that's not normal.
That is so true.
It might be common, but it doesn't necessarily be normal. And excuse me for using the word normal, but normal isn't healthy.
Mm-hmm. It might be common, but it is not. It doesn't necessarily mean it's normal. Yes. Thank you so much for saying that. So, guys, that you're pulling different all-nighters or that you're getting 2 hours of sleep doesn't mean that you're like on top of the world. It's not healthy at all, and it's not something that should continue. So thank you so much, Kate, for pointing that out. And now we're going to look at the long-term effects of sleep deprivation. Some of the things we saw as signs are also short-term effects, because like you're feeling fatigued, that's a short-term effect, right? But do you know that there are also long-term effects? Okay, so you're not sleeping well, you're consistently getting reduced sleep, or you're consistently sleep deprived. What are some of the long-term effects? And for Kate, what are some of the long-term effects for you?
Yeah, so I want to acknowledge too that like nobody has a perfect sleep pattern. Nobody practices perfect sleep hygiene. And I know that's kind of a funny term, sleep hygiene, although we use it, it's actually a very useful term, because just like we have dental hygiene, we wouldn't really dare not brushing our teeth anymore. Like, it's so ingrained into our practice of taking care of our bodies. Like, of course you do. And if you don't brush your teeth every day, there will be a consequence. You will not have dental health. You will have cavities. You will have gum disease. You have, all these things that likely in some way for different people will transpire. There will be a natural consequence to not brushing your teeth. And so why don't we think about sleep as having natural consequences if we don't honor the body and in our bio-individual way get the amount of quality sleep that we personally need? So that said, sleep hygiene, there's not a perfect scenario to that. So everybody has a night they stay up too late, they sleep in later, or they get up too early inadvertently, they have roommate issues. Poor sleep does happen to everybody, so I don't want to be judgmental about that. I want to just, that's okay to first just notice that you're going to feel something as a result of it. Okay. And is that something that you want to commit to or be okay with, make your normal for ongoing or chronic or longer term situations? There will be a consequence. I don't know exactly what it is for you, but statistically or research says that there's a number of things that could happen. So for me, So long-term or chronic could be like the course of your college career, right? So you might have a stressful semester and start to feel like you fall off balance or kind of off the rails even with your sleep. And hopefully that semester gets like smoothed out the next semester. Maybe you're more mindful around your course selection, depending on when your courses start in the day, or if you can find a rhythm and a routine for your week that feels a little bit more body compatible for you. Maybe you rearrange your roommate situation, realizing you're better off in a single, or if you live with different people. So again, I would just be reassessing your relationship to your sleep hygiene every so often. So that could be month to month or semester to semester, because you don't want an entire college career to transpire where you've just abandoned yourself, your body, including your sleep. So again, bad sleep happens, but there are things we can usually do about it. And if we don't, some examples will be like a diminished immune system. Did you know that so vaccinations are a big thing right now, right? They've always been around for like at least a good chunk of history at this point, but they're a very hot topic in recent histories of the pandemic. And so with vaccinations, we might care a little bit about it in ways we weren't so much before. And our body's response to vaccinations is diminished when we are sleep deprived in a more chronic nature.
That's very true.
It's just it's like a evidence of the status or health of our immune system. So our immune system is compromised so you might find that like after a really poor couple of weeks of, maybe you had to work extra hard, you had a lot of assignments, you're pretty overloaded and overwhelmed. And so you reach like the final stage of that, whether it's exams or a semester or something, and you get sick. Your body finally crashes and like succumbs to pathogens and whatever. It's finally, its defenses are done. And so we get sick. And I think that would happen to me every semester. I would go through finals and I would get sick. And then I was a high school teacher for many years. And I would be fine. And sometimes I'd be stressed out or my sleep would be compromised. And then by the time we got to a school vacation week, it was very common. I know this is a trend with a lot of teachers. You get sick on your vacation time, which is a bummer, right? Because that's like your time back to yourself to enjoy or take care. But in fact, you'd have to just like dig yourself out of this hole from all of the sleep deprivation and consequential symptoms or situations you'd find yourself in. So immune system is a really big one. We kind of say it like we assume our bodies are invincible, but it will, in a chronic way, it'll tend to catch up. Another one that's really important to me is mood balance or our mood regulation. So this is our mental emotional health. We tend to not totally appreciate the connection and relationship between our sleep and how we feel the next day, because we kind of have this like baseline sense that we are machines. And there's a lot of reasons, history, social, cultural, why we think of our body as like a machine and a mechanized thing. So we have these functions and we have these systems that are supposed to do a certain thing. So instead though, we are always in relationship, and all of our systems are in relationship to each other, and we're in relationship to ourselves, how we understand ourselves and perceive our own experience, and then we're in relationship to each other. And there's a lot of nuance to that, and there's like an artfulness to it, versus this like very rigid machine-like paradigm of the body. So when we think about that artful relationship, nuanced experience, it's much more obvious that, of course, our mood and our the way we understand ourselves and experience our relationships in the next day or the next, our life is highly impacted by how well we are sleeping. And this kind of comes down to a brain sensitivity, a brain chemistry thing, and also a sensitivity to the stressors of life. So we tend to be able to have some resilience to life and situations that gets very watered down when we are sleep deprived. And so therefore the activation again is higher. So we were talking about, we are more easily activated by stress when we are sleep deprived. And when we are very stressed, right, the stress system is happening, our stress response is on high, then we tend to get overwhelmed and stressed and anxious, or we tend to dip down and kind of feel defeated, right? These are sort of natural human experiences, but they're very heightened and magnified, and they don't feel particularly manageable when we are not internally resourced by things like our sleep. I would say nutrition and food are another like building block to that. Yeah, so that's a really big deal because we also have like a mental health crisis. And I don't want to say that sleep is like a panacea and going to fix everything, but I certainly think we shouldn't underestimate the building blocks of our body's well-being with some of these bigger issues and questions.
Yeah, that is so true. Just like you said, sleep might not eliminate everything that is going on, but it plays a vital role in helping us address what's going on, right? So it's very important. And some other long-term effects that I have to add to the ones you already said, because you already said so many great ones, right? Another one I have is like poor balance. Yes, sleep deprivation causes poor balance because your brain isn't like functioning properly when it's sleep deprived. It's very stressed, and then it's not sending the right signals to all your joints and all your muscles. And so poor balance is one long-term effect that can come.
Yeah, like did you remember I said I was really klutzy the next day?
Yes.
That's like another example of balance, even though it feels like not a really big deal, but like, yeah, I'm going to drop things, I'm going to forget things, I'm not going to feel very coordinated.
That's very true.
And that's basically another version of balance. There's not an integrative sense of the way my neurons are firing and the way they're communicating really effectively and smoothly to all the different systems of my body. So yeah, exactly, balance for sure.
Yeah, poor balance is one. And then another one is high blood pressure, because when we don't sleep enough, then we get stressed and we get tired and we get anxious, and then it's a cycle that happens, and this leads to high blood pressure. And so sleep deprivation can cause high blood pressure, even when we think, oh, don't worry, I can get poor sleep for 5 days of the week and try to like make up with the 2 days of the weekend. No, you're stressing like your heart and you're stressing your brain for those other days, and you can't really just undo those things at the end of the week, because that's not how it works, right? So high blood pressure is another one. And then really, just like Kate said, we have like memory issues. She mentioned it with the signs about how like slow thinking and all of that. And so memory issues are things that can come as a result of sleep deprivation. In fact, there are so many things that can happen, and we could go on and on and on, but we want to stop here and we want to say, okay, what can we do to get better sleep? How can we get better sleep? You were like, okay, I've heard you guys. Like, how can I get better sleep? Like, what are some tips you have for me? And so we're going to spend the rest of this time speaking about how you can get like better sleep and how you can get into a better sleeping rhythm. So over to you, Kate.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to acknowledge one thing really quickly that could honestly become an entire other episode. So maybe you'll pick this up and really go crazy with it. But when you mentioned high blood pressure, I couldn't help but thinking that was a symptom that feels so important to acknowledge the cultural social system impact on things like sleep and sleep on things like systems. So, for example, it's really easy for us to talk about all these different things, and we will go through these lists of very practical ways that we can reestablish really good sleep hygiene for our personal bodies. However, I also want to acknowledge that some people have to work 2 jobs, 3 jobs, and that they have a lot of compound stress in their life. And that does not mean that they are just really bad at sleep. That is not an individual situation. There are situations where just to get by or to do the basics of what we need to, have the life that we're trying to achieve, or, take care of our families, that we need to work really hard, or we need to take care and have a lot of really complicated responsibilities. And there are things that are beyond us at times that are not only on us to fix. And again, I know that word fix was something I really challenged last time.
Yes.
To resolve, to balance, to do well, to perform. So our health is always nested inside other layers of systems and situations. So I just want to acknowledge people who might be listening and saying, wow, that's easy for you, Kate, or that would be nice, but it's not really feeling applicable to me. It's not that easy. And sometimes, you know what, you're totally right. It's not that easy. And so I feel like the systems conversation on health and well-being, even at the student level, is really important to have. So
That's true.
we'll put a pin in that or like bookmark that for another day. But again, I just want to acknowledge people who are listening that this is not only, there's bio-individuality, but again, our bodies are always part of like a social body and a cultural body, right?
Yes.
Okay. So say we talk about that later and we acknowledge what an important, impactful dimension that is to our individual experience of health. What can we still do about it? Well, some things that you might already, like, Ruth, what do you already know? And then, like, how about if I add on to that? What do you already know as someone who's like finishing their first year of college? And I'm not meaning to put you on the spot because nobody like comes in necessarily as knowing all the things. But what have you known or learned about your body? And then if I can add on to things that we might not have recognized yet, what has worked for you to either maintain or reestablish your sleep, especially when you found like it's not in a good place? You know, what have you implemented to try to bring it back on course? And then I'll add on to that. Do you mind if I do that?
Sure. Okay. So for me, one thing is trying to go to bed and trying to wake up at the same time, right? Mm-hmm. I think I noticed that, let's say over the winter break, for example, I was going to bed at certain times and waking up at certain times. I was getting a certain amount of sleep. And then I came back to the semester and I wanted to get less than that. And I wanted to like fall back to the amount of sleep I was getting during the fall semester. And it threw me off so much because I had gotten into a rhythm that my body had adjusted to. Even if it wasn't like 8 hours already, my body had adjusted to having like 6-7 hours consistently, and it was fine with that, right? But when I tried to change that, it just threw me off, right? So one thing I've noticed is that sleeping and waking up at the same time, right, consistently helps my body a lot, because my body just falls into this healthy rhythm and it just makes me thrive. So yes, that's one thing.
That is such an important one. If nothing else, that feels like one of the most important health habits around our sleep hygiene is routine and rhythm. So our bodies really love and appreciate and tend to respond really well to predictability. So we come back to something called, we mentioned before, sleep drive and wake drive. So basically your routine and your rhythm, or your predictability of habit around your body, is what starts to establish and reinforce your sleep drive. So we start to pattern in when we start to feel sleepy. And then we start to pattern in when we start to wake up. I have students that will start to practice that and say, okay, let's start to practice setting an alarm, because I know you want to sleep way past this hour. On Mondays, you have to wake up early. So on Tuesdays, you sleep in super duper late. But essentially, that creates a very erratic schedule from your body's perspective.
True.
We're imposing the mind thing on the body when we try to like sleep in and catch up. But if we can establish a routine instead and just dare to afford a day or two where that's not super comfortable, getting back into rhythm will essentially reestablish the hormonal releases that coming and going in cycles and like at different hours of the day, so that basically your sleep drive and your wake drive feels really available. So when students are, dare to go with me on that project, what we do is we titrate it. So we don't just say, instead of if you wake up at 8 a.m. on Monday, but you sleep until noon on Tuesday, we don't just say like 8 a.m. to 8 a.m. like that's our new plan. We say, okay, 8 a.m. and then try to wake up maybe a half an hour, depending on the severity of the disturbance, a half an hour the next day earlier, or an hour the next day if it's really off. Let's start to, baby step it back into balance.
True.
That's what will help, because remember, your body came back and it was like, wait, I think I want to change. I'm going to try changing. And this actually feels really against the grain. This actually feels way harder for me to get a different version of sleep. But that's because maybe too much change was attempted too fast for the body to respond positively. It probably does want to come back in that direction, but it wants to come back in a very hand holding kind of way, almost sneaky, right? We're not going to jump scare it back into balance. We're going to just baby step it back. So I would really encourage, even if it's 15 minutes and you're starting to set your alarm, or go to bed 15 minutes earlier if you're a super night owl, just try to incrementally titrate it little by little. You'll probably get a much more effective or positive response from your body.
Yes, I think that's really important. So our first tip would now be to try to go to bed and wake up at the same time, but don't try to make the change at once. Don't try to make a drastic change, because that won't help your body. Your body would be thrown off balance. So just like Kate said, let's say you've been going to bed at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. You can make it, from 3 a.m. to 2:30, and then from 2:30 to 2, and then from 2 to 1:30, right? And then that would help your body to get into the rhythm, instead of going from sleeping at 3 a.m. to just sleeping at midnight. That would, and trying to go from waking up at 9 a.m. to waking up at 6 a.m. That would be too drastic for your body. So that's one tip. And so another tip here we have is to make sure that you're exercising regularly. But I'm going to throw that to you, Kate.
Yeah. That's a really big one. And I think they're all really intertwined, from our mental and emotional health and well-being to moving or exercising on a daily-ish basis. So there's so many different ways. So we talked a little bit about, I think anyway, last episode, about emotion. Maybe not. And one way I like to break down the word, we played with language last time, is emotion is like energy in motion. Yeah. And so emotions like to get stuck if we ignore them or just downplay them, or we really don't know what to do with them, and they kind of activate us and freak us out even more. But wow, I'm really sad. I don't know, maybe there's something wrong, and versus just allowing yourself to be sad. So when we talked about the stress response happening from sleep deprivation, and then often that stress response will get reinforced in a negative feedback loop, because we go to bed and we're like, wow, I'm really falling behind in my sleep, which is starting to stress me out. But now I'm getting stressed out trying to fall asleep, and it gets harder and harder to fall asleep, right? So with sleep issues, there tends to be two primary conditions. One is falling asleep, and the other one is staying asleep. Some people wake up frequently through the night, and other people have a hard time falling asleep. They lie in bed awake, ruminating and thinking. So physical exercise is one way for a lot of people, not everybody, but for a lot of people, it's a way to keep emotions and mental stuff, that like the clutter, moving through us rather than accumulating and getting stuck, which can then rear its head at the moment we try to fall asleep, being a little unprocessed. So it's a way to process life. Let life move through you. Let energy of motion move through you, so that there's not so much heavy stuff undigested that's starting to get our attention when we start to fall asleep. And so that for me, it's basically a physical, metabolic, nervous system discharge. It's a huge release, your exercise piece. Okay. So then you feel a little bit more regulated by the time your head starts to hit the pillow. But then the other piece, like I mentioned, is that mental emotional piece. And so a lot of times we try, if you feel really tired, but you go to bed and your mind is racing still. So we call that wired and tired. That's when your mind and your body are seemingly on very different pages, right? Your body's clearly physically tired, but your mind is very wired. It's stuck in that activated response. So one way to help them come back on the same page, or essentially integrate the mind-body, which is where our sleep does its best work, is by mind dumping excessive thoughts, thinking, worries, to-do lists, all the unfinished business, ideas. Sometimes creativity starts to get stirred up. Put that down on paper next to your bed or at your desk. Just unload it. Don't try to organize it. Don't try to make it pretty. Just put it down. Just scribble it down, write it down. The minute something gets your attention and you're trying to fall asleep, don't hope that thought goes away, because then you're kind of in a relationship of tension with the thinking, and the thinking is natural, or it's something that you've conditioned yourself to do. So instead of being like fighting the thinking mind, just put the thinking mind on paper over here. And then it's a little bit out of your head, so to speak, and your head feels a little bit less busy, and it can start to decompress and release down into sleep. So that for me is one of my favorite personal things, is I always have paper, or for me, down in my kitchen, I write everything I possibly can down on a piece of paper, and then I go upstairs to bed and I say, okay, what's done is done. If I really need to remember it the next day, I'm pretty sure it will resurface tomorrow. Otherwise, all those little details that feel busy and distracting, they're on paper. So I can trust that they're waiting for me tomorrow, and then I can figure out what to do with them after some quality sleep.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you for drawing this connection, because I love how you just connected this, like how when we exercise, it's then like connect to helping us like declutter our mind, and writing down, because I think writing down is also very important. And the next my list was on like not going to bed with your problems, and you already connected that so smoothly, right? And so it's very important that we try to declutter our mind before we go to bed, because when our mind is still very active, it's hard for our body to rest. It's hard for our heart to slow down, because our mind is still thinking of, oh, I have that like paper, I have that project. And the truth is that sometimes we have so many things going on in our minds, right? You're writing finals, you have that thesis to defend, you have that friend who you're not getting along well with, and there can be a million things happening, right? And so that's why I love this technique that you said, Kate, on writing down things. You would be surprised at how much can happen when you just decide to sit down and say, okay, number one, this is on my mind, and then just write them down. It's a bit like you're emptying a container, right? And it's very, very refreshing to do. So yes, that technique is very useful, and I would highly recommend to any and everyone, honestly. Even if you feel like you don't have so much like on your mind, just like decluttering before you go to bed is very important.
Can I actually insert one little thing too, in that don't take your worries to bed? A lot of what I mentioned actually sounds like mental thinking and thoughts, and getting that on paper, which is true. But I also want to acknowledge that when it really feels more like a worry, like something heavy or hard on your heart, that journaling for some people is good, because it's basically letting your heart speak on paper.
True.
Or it's a way of, again, moving the emotion through your body, hand, pen, utensil, and then onto paper, right? So it's not keeping it stored and stuck inside. But sometimes people are more verbal or oral processors and need to talk it out with a friend. Or sometimes that friend doesn't feel like they're available to you, or a sufficient resource, because what you're going through is actually really immense and complicated and well over what you feel like you can swim through. That happens to most people at some point too. So I really want to make sure that it's absolutely encouraged to find a counselor or a trusted person in your life that might be even skilled and trained to meet you there with those stressors and worries. That's not something you necessarily have to swallow or push down and then still figure out your sleep in order to be a healthy person and a good person. No, we all need relationship and community and resource to find that balance and that homeostasis that we keep talking about being so important. So sometimes your worries and paper, it's not quite enough. And please do reach out to find bigger or more appropriate support.
Yes, please reach out for support. Support is very important, because sometimes many things can feel very overwhelming, but then when you have people who are holding your hand and people who reassure you that you're not alone, it will go a very long way. And so we're going to move on to the next tip on our list, and this is kind of like a 2-in-1 tip, which is avoid excessive liquids before going to bed, but also make sure that you don't go to bed hungry. And I'm going to speak to this personally, because I noticed that when I go to bed hungry, I usually toss and turn, and it's hard for me to fall asleep, because I'm like holding my tummy, and I'm thinking of like all the possible things I could snack on. And so yes, don't go to bed hungry, honestly speaking, because it's going to interrupt the quality of your sleep. But also don't take excessive liquids before you go to bed. Don't like drink like so many cups of water, because you're going to want to get up like in the middle of the night, right? And so those two tips are very important.
Yeah, and what happens when you have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night? Well, I don't know about you, but for me, I go back to bed and then my brain's like, oh, she's up. Great. Well, all those things that she wrote down, let's start thinking about them and figuring them out and worrying about them. Because what if we don't remember them in the morning and then everything falls apart and spiral, right? And then it's 2 a.m. and I'm like, well, sure, I have to go to sleep because I have a big day tomorrow, right? And so then I feel the pressure to fall back asleep, and the stress cycle continues, and my sleep deprivation gets feeling like it's in a stuck mode. So in order to avoid that, I love to have tea in the evening. I know I might not party as hard as some people listening at this point in my life. So for me, it's tea. But sometimes, if I do have alcohol, and I have more alcohol than my body loves for me to consume, it totally interferes. So whether it's the liquid part of it or it's the substance in the alcohol, which is a stimulant. And not only is it a stimulant for the mind, but it raises your body temperature. And your body temperature actually wants to be on the cooler end of scale for when you sleep. We sleep better in a cooler environment, both internal, external environment. So an stimulant like caffeine or alcohol is going to raise our body's temperature, which is going to interfere with our sleep. It's going to activate our mind in a way that's interrupting the downshift or the impulse for a sleep drive. And it's going to maybe have us wake up just really unsettled. And all of those things tend to interfere with the quality of our sleep.
Really, really, really important, right? And in fact, you mentioned temperature, and that connected very nicely to the last point we have here, which is make your bedroom a comfortable place for you to sleep. Make it a comfortable place that you associate with sleep. Because sometimes when our bedroom is not a place of sleep, and when it's full of so many things, or when it's filled with so many activities, right, our brain can start associating it with other things, and start associating it with stress. So making sure that we're designing or we're arranging our bedroom in such a way that when we come in, we can lie down and say, okay, I'm going to bed, or okay, that was a long day, but this is the place of rest, right? It's very important.
I think of the letter S. So we ideally want to create something that looks or feels like a sanctuary for sleep. And also, sex is also something. So sexual health or sexual well-being or sexuality can very rightly live in our bedroom space. So sleep and sex in the bedroom, and ultimately it feels like a sanctuary. And neither sleep nor sex really thrives when we are under stress. So whether the environment feels stressful, whether the material that feels associated, like your computer staring at you from your bed, or the clock telling you what time it is in those wee hours of the morning, those can, trigger a stressful association. So think about creating a sanctuary.
For me, I try to make sure that I'm not keeping my schoolwork in my bedroom, right? So I keep that in our common room, on my table, in my book rack, and on my shelf, right? Making sure that my books and things like that are going to the appropriate place, instead of keeping them by my bed, or keeping them just where my clothes are. I make sure that my bedroom is filled with just my clothes and things that talk about going to rest or getting ready for school the next day, or getting ready to go out, right? And so that's one major way I do it, by separating work from sleep.
So our brain is the primary organ of our sleep response, right? And our brain is paying attention to all the details around our space all the time. And so I love what you're saying, because it feels like the simplest action we can take towards sleep hygiene is placing our work life away from the details around our sleep space, right? So it's something that we tend to do unconsciously all the time, is keep our work life really close or in and around our sleep space. But our brain is kind of taking the cues, whether we're aware, conscious of it or not, all the time. So I love the fact that you're already practicing, and that's just practice. It's just reminders, it's sticky notes, it's getting into a new habit. A new habit takes about 21 days to establish. So patience. The other thing you can do is not just take away things that feel maybe like they are associated with something more stressful, but also adding in things that feel relaxing, right? For example, like some people use aromatherapy. So like lavender essential oil, right? And I don't think that these things fix all of our life's problems, so please respect. But they do interact with our sensory organs. So like our sense of smell is very, very directly linked to our brain chemistry. So the olfactory bulb from which our nose takes in information sits right in the middle of our deep brain. So there's actually, kind of surprisingly, a very direct relationship between when we're smelling. That's why the power of smell actually is incredibly associated with our memory system. So when you smell something, when you're walking by, I don't know, wherever, it automatically, very commonly, triggers a memory. Oh, this reminds me of my grandmother's kitchen.
Yes.
Or, oh, this reminds me of that time I was camping. Or, oh, right? So it's very easy for our smell and our memory. But what's cool is that you can start to manipulate that in a positive way or on purpose so that you can create relaxing associations with a certain aroma. So, for example, I was a massage therapist. I would use certain smells or aromas in the space. And so when they would go home, my clients, and they would use lavender at home, it would remind them of how safe and relaxed they felt when they were with me, you know, in that space and relaxing their muscles and their body. So you can create associations like that. A lot of people also will use sound machine or like ambient sounds with a meditation app, you know, Calm or Headspace. Those kinds of apps often will just have something called a soundscape. So you can listen to guided imagery or words or a relaxation meditation, or just like the ocean, waves lapping, you know, something very calming and associated with nature tends to elicit a relaxation response, and that tends to set the stage for sleep. So you can add or contribute to your space, not just take away the stress.
That's actually very true. I think one thing that I like in my space, it's like a string light, like a colorful string light, and I really like it because of it, my room is not completely dark, but it's also not completely bright. It's like a very cool atmosphere. It's just really beautiful. That's one thing I like that is in my room. And I'm actually curious to know what our listeners have in their rooms that like helps them with their sleep, or one thing they've taken away that has helped them sleep better. So if you're listening to this, please let us know what thing you've added to your bedroom or what thing you've taken away that has contributed positively to your sleep. Because for so many of us, it could be so many different things. I have a friend who has some soft animals like bears and all of that, because they just bring this feeling of warmth and safety and rest. So I'm really curious to know that what you all use or you all have taken away from your space. This has been an amazing episode, but we would have to draw the curtains here. Thank you so much, Kate, for joining us today. These insights were just amazing, simply amazing. So many takeaways, and I personally will go back to listen to this over and over again because there are just so many key points from here. So I'm going to do a quick recap of the tips we gave. We said try to set a consistent time of going to bed and waking up. Exercise is very key, and then trying to declutter your mind will go a long way. Trying to journal before going to bed, trying to write, even if it's bullets of the things that are on your mind, that would go a long way, because then your brain can try to relax and allow your body to go to bed. Don't take excessive liquids before going to bed, but don't also go to bed hungry. Try to eat something during dinner time so that you are not like turning and tossing, and then try to make your bedroom comfortable and a place of sleep, so that you can either know that, okay, you're here and you're going to sleep, or that you're out there and you're about to work.
Can I add two
Sure.
notes? One, I would ask, can we start a little revolution where sleep is sexy and cool and not just sleeplessness as a badge of honor?
Yeah.
Yes? Can we start that? You and I?
Yes.
Okay, cool. And the other one is sleep is not wasted time.
Ooh.
Maybe we should write that down. Sleep is not wasted time. So I dare you to consider sleep a worthwhile part of your life, part of your day. And because quality sleep matters, why? Because you matter, your body matters, and the quality of your life matters.
Yes, yes, yes. Mic drop. Mic drop. Thank you so much, Kate. Sleep is indeed not wasted time. Make sure that you're getting quality sleep. We know that it can be hard, and there can be so many things that are hindering you from getting quality sleep. But then your health matters. Your health should always be a priority. And this would help you a long way in becoming the better version of yourself, and in being productive, and in being the person you want to be, not just even for others, but the person you want to be for yourself. Thank you so much for joining us again today. Please don't forget to like and share it to other people who you think will find this helpful. And then please let us know what you do to your sleep space to make it feel more comfortable. Send us an email at bloomingdaily01@gmail.com, and I assure you that you will get a response. Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you once again, Kate. I'll see you guys on the next episode. Bye.
Sweet dreams.